Anywhere in my notes, I mentioned TSQL. These commands only pertain to Microsoft SQL Server, and they're not like MySQL. So I kind of put that together here so you can kind of see the differences between the two. And I also added one more for Oracle, just in case if you wonder why. But mainly, one of the major differences between these databases. And if you switch over to like Progress SQL or SQLite, there's some variation in different as well. But one of the key points here, which we will do later in future chapters when we create database tables, is the keyword identity for Microsoft SQL Server. MySQL uses the auto increment, which is, I think, kind of same for the SQLite and PostgreSQL, I think. And then Oracle, as you can see, they have different ways to automate or increment the keys. Now, this is a very important attribute we'll see later when we create tables. Just to clarify that every table should have a unique ID and usually have a primary key. And then if that primary key is a number, it has to be a whole number, like integer only. Then you can add this, attribute called auto increment _ increment, and that ID will be tracked by the database server, and it will automatically increment it by itself, so you don't have to manage it. Okay, that's what's that auto increment for, and then use identity for T-SQL and so forth. Okay, so just to clarify that. Down here, again, just some differences between the two here. These are some of the built-in commands built into the system. So every database server has its own set of commands and functions built into them, in addition to the standard, the ANSI standard commands, which should be compatible across all database systems, actually all relational database systems. Okay, but I mean, like for example, T-SQL has its own functions. MySQL has its own, but under the hood, it's still going to be, breaking down into the low-level ANSI standard functions. And this just takes a much more, effort to actually write some code. And so they create some shortcuts, basically. Okay, so just be mindful of that. I put a list here. I'm not sure this is the complete list. It may be, may not be, but I mean, you don't have to, use all of them in this class, of course, but some of these will become very handy. Okay, these commands here we'll deal with this much later in the course when we, do scriptings, right? You have like begin, end, and we have the loop in there as well. You can write a little bit of function to, handle a chunk of commands. We'll do that later. Some of the common built-in functions we'll see are the concat, or concatenating, two or more column or fields together to form a new field. Some of the dates functions are also important, and rounding numbers, right? See, these are common functions built into the system, and you can use it to, manipulate numbers and dates or not. Okay, so that's one. The next one, let's head over here. Let's see if this is the right one. Okay, so the select statement, again, is the most common one. This is, you see, okay. This is, if you have heard of the term or the acronym CRUD or CRUD, which stands for create, read, update, and delete data, which is the most common type of operations in any language, any program, you hear that probably a lot of times. And databases, it's no different. So the select statement is equivalent to the R in CRUD for reading. Okay, so when you read data or you query data, you're basically pulling data from the server, right? So you're not really touching the actual data. I mean, you do touch the data, but you don't really make changes to the data. So it's pretty safe, right? So it's pretty safe to use it. You can't delete data. You can't lose data using the select statement. All it does is basically retrieve data and then either display it to the console, as you will see, or save the data to another file, or even save that data to, or you pass the data to another select statement. We have that nested data query stuff. We will do a little bit of that a little bit later. Okay, but so here is the syntax for this. That is a common, very common syntax. It's not complete, by the way. This another command, like the limit stuff, are in here, but it's the select followed by, the star, which in this case is a wildcard, followed by the word from, and then you have the table name. Again, we talked about the schema last week. Schema is, in this case, could be a single word, which is, in this case, would be a database table. I mean, a database name, or it could be a user or a group name. Can also include the actual server itself and the IP addresses and so forth. But indeed, schema. And then the rest are basically just optional, okay? So let's go down here to the actual statement syntax for the select statement. I put here both for SQL Server and MySQL. I did that because, again, I already have the SQL Server, so why not, right? Leave it there in case if you do want to explore, then it's all here, okay? You can compare the two. There's slight variations, but mostly it's identical. So to read this command, here, everything you see based on the syntax here, okay, everything that in the square bracket are optional, right? So that means you don't have to use it. As you can see, I'm not sure if it shows everything. It's not, okay. So you can have select is required. Everything from the all the way to the end of that, right? Here is optional. That means you don't need to use it. The expression select something, right? This is required because it's not inside the bracket. So select something. And then even the from is all optional. Everything here is optional. Okay? So because the select statement is also can be used to print data. That's why it's simple like that. But again, all the rules are in here. I'm not expecting you to know all of them, just too many, right? I don't know if it has as many as SQL Server. If you compare the information here with the SQL Server, it's even probably more confusing, but indeed. So the things that we'll learn in this class are the select statements, the from a table or partition, the where clause for filtering data, the group by, okay, the having clause, and the order by. So we're not going to touch too much about the limit. It's okay. It's not a big deal. But I don't think I'm going to expect you to insert this data to another query. I think the book does cover a little bit on that, but we're not going to focus too much on this part because it's a little bit too confusing. Okay. But these will be covered. Hopefully we'll see tonight. I mean, the where clause and group by and what they do and why they're important in here. And it's important to also know that it has to be in this order. If you rearrange in different order, it will not work and it may not work. If you omit, for example, group by and you just do where and then order by, then that's fine. Select something from a table, order by, it's okay. But you can't put select from some table, order by a column, and then where after that. It doesn't work. Okay, so it has to be in this order. That's important. All right, so down here again, just explanations, very similar to the SQL Server. Here, let's see what's next after this. Let me go back to this part, and we'll refer back to this diagram when we do some commands. Okay, so I have that statement. I have in here as well the where clause, order by and group by and having. But we'll come back to this a little bit later when we get to this part, okay? But first of all, let's go ahead and fire up our system. As I'm going to launch the workbench. I'm going to go down here and type in the workbench. Also, make sure that your database systems are running. I have 2 different versions of systems installed here. You can have as many as you want, okay? And you can scan it. Again, right-click on it and then do a rescan. And if any server that is installed on your machine, it will capture that and then list it here, whether they are running or not, right? But you do want to make sure they are running. If they're not running, they're not going to be connected. So I'm going to pick the SQL9. My password is, again, just admin on my system. So here we are, and we have, we're just going to make this bigger. I'm sure there's configuration somewhere to make this much bigger, but I'm sorry, it's a little bit small. I can't see, maybe. If you can't see, let me know. But okay, so here is the interface. The query one here, that's the way it is. That's fine. I'm going to close it, just open another one. You know, so it's a little bit different. I'll make it a little bit bigger here. Now, to run your statements, you have to be connected to a server. If it's not connected, I don't think this workbench will let you run any commands in here. So first of all, I'm going to write this select statement. So follow the convention that all commands should be in uppercase. It is case insensitive by default. I believe you can configure it to have it case insensitive, but you probably don't want to do that, okay? Because it's just the way it is of the language. So select, you know, it doesn't matter. It should be fine. It just look ugly, right? Select, and then if you just terminate that, you see it tells you it's an error. The little X here means that you can't just have it itself. You have to have something, at least something like a 1. Okay? So back to that syntax, right? Select followed by something, an expression. That is the minimum requirements for this statement. The rest is, again, optional. Now, the semicolon, as far as I know, if it's by itself, it's okay. You don't have to put it there. But if I have like 2 statements like that, right? So either this tool or MySQL requires that you have a semicolon to separate or terminate the statements. Otherwise, it would think that this is still part of that select statement. Okay. Now, if you're using like SQL Server or the Microsoft SQL Server Studio, I think it doesn't require semicolon. You can have multiple lines in here as many as I want. It doesn't matter. But I think, let's see if it knows it. Yeah. So in SQL Server, if you just hit the character return, that terminates the statement. But here, you have to make sure you put a semicolon after every statement. Just keep that as a rule of thumb. Okay. So I have 2 statements here. So the select statement is it does something, it retrieves something back. So in this case, it retrieves a 1, right? Since I put a literal number there, it could be a number as well. I mean, a string like this. So again, the rule is all text must be quoted with a single quote only. As far as I know, a double quotes will not work. Well, actually, it does here. Interesting, because we'll see. But in I think SQL Server doesn't let you do it. So let me run this, see what happens. Okay, so good. All right, so just stick with the single quotes, okay? Because that is universal across all relational database systems. I don't like to use double quotes in databases because I'm just so used to SQL Server. So stick with the single quotes, okay? So here we have 2 statements. And all I'm doing is basically select, because I have 2 statements, I have 2 separate tabs down here, okay? So each select statement will return a result. So however many select statements you have, you're going to have the many tabs down here. Okay, so the first statement runs and prints the number 1 down here because that's all it does. Retrieves something and then prints it out. And that's what we see down here. The second statement is, again, print a string of hi to the console here. Okay, it's running in a grid format. I think you can change this. Let Let's see if I'm not mistaken, I think maybe on the right side. Yeah, you can change. So you can see the output here on the right side is a little bit different from the SQL Server Studio, but by default, it is the grid output, right? It shows in the Excel format. If you change this to a different type, you can see it prints out different results. So however you like it, you just pick and choose here. And it's kind of nice to do that. You can even save it or export the result out to another text file and so forth. Okay, so that is the single, the minimum requirement for the select statement. It does not select any database, so you don't have to pick a database. It doesn't really matter because I'm not referencing anything in the database. Okay, so of course, the common way to do it is you're going to select something. The star is by far the most common one as well. It's a wild card. The star means select everything, or all the columns, even I think hidden columns. There are sometimes you have hidden columns you can see. It will actually retrieve everything and then display that to the console. If I just do this, right, and you can see that has an error because the star is not a character. It's a special placeholder, right, for everything that comes in. So you cannot just run something like this. It's expecting some data to come through. So select star from, and then you put a table. Okay, so the schema here indeed, let's say I'm going to call something from the AP table, AP database. So you can put like AP dot the name of the table. Let's do the invoices like that, right? Now, if I just run this command, and then you're going to see that it works fine. Okay, you see all the data coming here. It tells you this tool here doesn't tell you right below here, but in different systems, it'll tell you the total number of rows. But you can see down the bottom, the very last line, it tells you that has 114 rows or records returned at this speed, right? It's so fast, you have like 0.0000 or something milliseconds or seconds. It doesn't have enough number to show, but just so simple, so it's so fast. Now, the textbook gives you this AP database and a few others under the EX, for example, and the OM here. It doesn't have a lot of data. As you can see, we have only like 114. And SQL Server, where we used to teach before, we have the database to provide called AdventureWorks has about like, I think 20 or something thousand records. And this is a little bit more interesting. But maybe like in the world example, the world here has another sets of data that you can use and just to practice, okay? But we're going to focus mainly on the AP for now. So notice that when I do a select star from something, right? If I include the schema, then I don't need to select the database because it's already referenced here, okay? If I don't include that schema, if I just put invoices, now it's important to tell this tool which database I'm calling this invoice from. So if I just leave it like that, if you run the command, it's going to fail. It's going to tell you the bottom down here. It says, there's no table from the system doesn't exist. Why does it say sys invoice? I know, again, a little bit small. And the reason why is because if you look at on the left panel, the word sys or the database called sys is bolded, right? That means that this is the selected table of database. So if you don't want to use the schema, like I showed you, the AP or something, then you have to select the database. In this tool, you have to basically just double click on the database until it turns bold like this. So now AP is now selected. It is the database system that all your commands here will be used against to make against, right? Run against this database here. And then its tables down here and so forth. So now it knows that this invoices table must exist inside the tables, a category here. If it's not, it's going to fail. But by selecting this, database, you don't have to include the schema. So now it will work just like before. Okay, so that's important. to know, just in case if you do the homework and you want to write why it's not working. Okay, so that's one thing you can do. Just be mindful that this command, right, expects that you have to already select the AP database. If you want to make sure that doesn't matter where you're at, it's always work. You put the schema in front of it. So in that way, it doesn't matter which database you're on, select it, it will always select from the correct database. Okay. If you don't do that, you can also use the command called use and then the database name above it. All the following commands will be referenced or run against this database here. Whether I pick something else or not, if I want to run this command, that means it's going to switch the reader, right, the command to the AP database. And then now I run it, it will be just like you selected the database over here. Okay, so that is something you can try if you want to try that. But this is important. This is useful for when you write scripts. And later when you write scripts, you actually need to do this. So you can switch between different databases and whatnot. But again, if you don't use this, you can do all sorts of using the schema, then it becomes independent. AP from there. I can have another one down here, select from, and then in EX dot whatever table is, and the active invoices. So now I have two statements that run using different schema, and you get the results down here. All right, so I want to just clarify that. Okay, so I'm selecting from the invoices table. Everything is coming through because I have, it does have data. It does have, I'm just pointing to the correct table. Now, again, the table names it should be case insensitive. So I could have, even the database names, I could have like invoices like this. It should still work. Okay, as you can see, it still works. Even the table database as well, it should still be fine. Okay. The dot is commonly used for like directories, if you will, but basically ownership, right? So the AP database has a invoice table. Let's see if this actually works. Okay. So as you can see, this is, you can also, okay, yeah, doesn't work here, probably SQL Server thing. In SQL Server, you can also use this for bracket, but doesn't like it here. Okay, select everything from the invoices, and then you basically print that out here. Okay. Now it has 114. The limit here is set to 1,000 because that's the way it is. You can also turn this off or on to, let's say, 10. Now this drop down will impact your statements here, or all your statements rather. So instead of 114, it should return only the top 10. Okay, you see that it matches down here as well. So that is something you want to watch out for. If you type something and say, hey, I want to show all of them, but I only return 10, then just make sure this is selected to don't limit this, and it will return everything. So you let your statements command control it. Okay. Of course, the limit here can also be added here. You put at the very last, I think, the limit, and you put like 5, and then they'll return only 5. And that will also override the drop down. Okay. But we'll do that. Let's see what we can do. So the star selects everything. If you want to select and pick and choose only certain columns, then you must replace this star. Okay, you cannot have star and then something else, right? Either all or nothing for the star. So if I want to pick it, once I know the column names or the fields, then you can put it here before the from statement. And if you want to pull more than one columns, you will separate each with a comma. Okay, so I can get like the invoice ID, invoices ID. Now you notice that when I type something, okay, this tool, when I type invoice, right, it doesn't know what field. If I type in vendor, right, and then underscore ID, it doesn't highlight that. I wonder why. Let me see if I do this. Because usually it will give you the shortcut if you like an IntelliSense. So it turns, yeah, I'm not sure why. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. If it does, then it's great. If it doesn't, then you just have to manually type it out. So I want the terms. I said I want the invoice ID, okay, the vendor ID, and then just the terms ID. Now, white spaces are optional. You can have white spaces. You don't have to have white spaces. Doesn't matter. But between the actual commands, you do have at least one space. If you don't do that, it's not going to work. Okay. So just one white space in here. So I'm only picking 3 columns and then return everything just on those 3 columns. Again, I'll get a total records of 114 still, but I only pick those 3 columns. Okay. And then, so that's how you select multiple columns. Now, notice the name invoice underscore ID and vendor IDs and whatnot here. Whatever you type here, if I'm not mistaken, let's put ID here. Let's see what happens. Okay, you're going to see that the result, the heading, each column is exactly whatever you type here. Okay, and the column must match exactly how it is named in the table. So if you go into the invoices table columns, you have the underscore. If you don't include underscore, it's not going to work, right? Because there's no column with the invoice and space ID. So it must match the column name, and then you can have it uppercase, lowercase, it doesn't matter. Or if you type it, it will show up here in the result. Okay. If you want to rename this invoice ID with a unique ID the column, then you just put the word as and then a new name in string. Let's just say, I don't know, invoice underscore ID, like that. Or if you make it like this, invoice ID. Let's see if this works, okay? And you're going to see that now the column name has been changed to something that I want, right? I can give a different name, doesn't matter, invoice number, right? And it will give you that new column name with the invoice number. And this will replace the actual column name. So it's nice to have this option when you do a query and you want to print a result set table and give it a name the way that you like. So use the keyword as something. This is going to be the alias for the actual column names. And you can do the same for all of them, okay, if you want. And I believe the word as is also optional. You don't have to use the word as. You can just keep it like that with at least a space, and you will replace that with a different number. So for this example, okay, you see that I replace it with the new column name. You can resize these just for your own good. So the as is just a little bit longer to type, but if you're careful, then you can rename these columns. Same thing with these as well, okay? You can do the same thing. Invoice ID, put like a vendor ID, like that. And you have a new column name for that. Okay, so that's how you can alias column names for the output. Now, you can also, I believe, it's actually quite common to write these in multi-lines. So the word from, instead of having at the end of that statement, you could put it down here at the next line. Okay, so select. If it's confusing, you can even do this, right? Select everything from that and then from this table like this. So it looks nicer later on when you query a lot of columns. It looks really confusing and very cluttery, right? If you have a single line. So as you can see, it still works, right? You can even do this. If it's easier, you can do each on its own line like this. I mean, just easier to see, right? As long as you terminate the statements with a semicolon down here and not somewhere up here, then good to go. Okay. So reading this way, right, it's easier to see things. Now, once you get the data, then you can sort it, right? It's going to use the order by. And let me move this a little bit down here if I can. Okay, I'm going to close this down here. So if you want to sort this, then you can put the command order by, 2 words, and then you can pick a column. So let me do this so I can kind of follow the convention. And make sure, again, the semicolon does not terminate up there. I wanted to sort by the maybe, vendor ID. So VEND. Okay. But right now it's not sorted. If I do that, and you see that now it's sorted by the vendor ID. And then the other 2 columns are not sorted. By default, it's going to be in the ascending order from smallest to largest. If you want to, you can also include the word ASC for ascending, or you can take the whole word out. I think ascending, if I'm not mistaken. I think it doesn't like it. ASC for ascending. Give the same result. That is a default order. And you can also type DESC for descending order. It should go the other direction from large to small, as you can see. Okay. You can sort multiple columns together if you want. So I could do like vendor ID, descending, and then a comma I put here, terms ID, ascending or something, right? You can do that if you like. Now, this is a little bit tricky because the way order by works, right? Just in case you're not aware or you're not here for understanding, when you sort 2 or more columns, right, it goes from left to right. So first, it's going to sort the vendor ID first. It's going to sort all this vendor ID, 1, 2, 3, from large to small, 123. And then based on the first sort, right? And then the next thing is that based on the first sort, it's going to look for the terms ID. And it look at that terms ID and it will sort that terms ID. Of course, it's not going to sort everything here. It's going to sort that terms ID based on, the 123, right? So all the terms ID that are categorized under the vendor 123 will be sorted in ascending order. If there's only one terms ID, then that's it sorted. And then it would do that for every pair, okay? Every group of IDs in here. So you can see that if, again, it's not a lot of data to play with, so you can't really see it. Right? But you see that like 115 has only 4 and they're all 4s. Not a lot of data to play with here. But there are sometimes you have like vendor ID and then the terms might have like terms 1, 2, and 3 or 4, whatever. And it will sort that based on the vendor ID group and so forth. So it's confusing to actually see how it works, but you can sort multiple columns. Okay. And then as far as I know, the columns here, let me see if this is true. Let me see if I try a different ID. Let's sort this by the payment date. Okay, I'm picking the payment date here. And you see this actually works. Okay, you see that it actually works fine. So the rule is that you can sort by any column you want. These columns down here does not have to be the columns you selected up here. You may wonder why. Why would you do that? I mean, I don't know, for whatever reason, right? But you can sort by any columns as long as the columns or the fields are in the table. Okay, but again, not very common, but you sure can. It doesn't have to be any one of these at all. Okay, so that's the order by. When you sort, and again, it's you have to kind of go back to the syntax and make sure you follow the rule, how to use it. I think the order by is like, yeah, I don't remember exactly what order by. It's usually towards the bottom of all the other attributes, because it's when you sort the entire result set, right? So that's the order by. And then the other commands is the where clause. Okay, so the where clause is for filtering. So you have to do the where clause before the order by, right? Everything must be queried. You get the complete data set, and then you can sort, right? So you want to sort first, and then you order by. I don't think that works. Okay, so let's say that I want to select those information. I want to use a where clause to filter where followed by a condition. Okay, the condition is a true-y, falsy value. If you just put like 1 like that, right? Because 1 is a number. So in the true-y, falsy context or values, 1 is always true, right? Where something is true. In this case, 1 is indeed true. So in that case, I'm going to get everything in. So I'm going to get 114 rows because 1 is indeed true. If I put like, what about 0? Okay. So 0 is considered false, right? So 1 is true, 0 is false. That means that select everything from the invoice where something is false, right? So I get nothing returned. That's why you get no result set down here. So that's kind of tricky. But again, that's not very common. I'm just showing you where that condition is. So what you select here must be evaluated to a true or false condition. That's why it's called a conditional expression. So the condition is, you can do something like 1 is equal to, right? In this case, is false because 1 is not equal to. So I get the same thing. Nothing should return because this one is not true. This is, if this where clause is true, then my selections here will run correctly. And if the database does have a table of invoices, everything comes in. So 1 equals 1, that's true. So I get everything in. Okay. So the equal operator is, in this case, a single equal sign. Can also be used later for assignment when we write code. So I can assign a variable, right? Like data equals 1, or you can use, in this case, it's the equivalent operator. Whereas in some languages, you use a double equal sign like this to do equality. But in the relational database systems, it's just a single equal operator, and a little confusing, but I'll keep that in mind, okay? So now make it a little bit more useful is based on the invoice or the terms I selected here. I want to pick and choose maybe only those, maybe vendor, let's say when vendor ID is equal to 72. I just want all the vendor ID 72 and then sort that by payment. Again, this is not useful, but it's okay for now. So you can see that it returns all the rows that has the vendor ID equals 72, exactly 72. Okay, it has to match exactly. This is an exact match. If you want to select a vendor ID that is greater than 72, you put a greater here. This is not inclusive, so it'll be 73 and above. And maybe you can sort this by vendor ID. So we can see a little bit better. Okay, so we'll sort that. And you see that it has 80 is the next largest, and all the way to 122 or something, 125. Okay, so the operator here, if you want to include 72, then you can try that operator. That is inclusive, right? 72 is included, and then greater than that, or less than, right? Just those math operators. Okay, here. Not equal to, I think, let me see if it does have. like that, right? Your pound sign. The exclamation mark is the not operator, not equal to 72. I mean, exclude 72 and select all the rest. Okay, so this is a single condition, or I say single pair of conditions. You can also use like the or, like an AND operator, to have compound conditions. So it can do like not equal to 72 and, right, vendor ID, we can say, and terms ID is equal to 3. Okay, that means both have to be true, right? It will evaluate this, get a true or false. If it's false, then the entire statement is false automatically, and then it's not going to work, right? So therefore, it's going to select all the non-vendor without the not the 72, and based on those sets, select only with the terms is 3. Okay, so you can see that if you look at the data down here, everything should come through, excluding the 72. But because you have the AND operator, I'm saying pick only those terms ID are 3. So therefore, only the terms ID will be 3. And then we also excluded some of these vendor IDs because they are not equal to, they don't have the terms ID of 3, right? May not be 72, but it must also have 3. So therefore, some of those are actually excluded. Okay, that's why I only have about 78 rows as opposed to something more. So the AND operator, it's if I'm not mistaken, is what's called a short circuit operator, right? It goes from left to right, and it checks it. If this is true, then check the next one, and then the next one, and so forth here. And you can have as many as you want, and invoice ID, whatever, well, 1 equals 1 or something. Okay, as many as you want. Just be careful how you do this. When you have multiple operators like this, sometimes you want to group them differently. So maybe I want to check, this first, right? You can put parentheses around it so that it will evaluate this inside the parentheses first. You get a result, true or false, and then run that against this operand using an AND operator, and then you get the result. Okay, so that's how the AND works. Same thing with the OR. OR is just the opposite. I can mix and match the two as well. So if you don't put inside the parentheses, it's going to evaluate from left to right, and your result may be different from what we expect. So just make sure you want to, specify which one should occur first. So this means that the parenthesis takes precedence, evaluate this first, and then get true or false, and then you OR this one. So one of them had to be true. If both are false, then nothing is returned, right? So that's just the end of OR. This is not like exclusive to databases. It's all programming languages and math and so forth. Right? Okay, so that's the where clause. Let's go back and make this a little bit easier. So notice again, if I move this down to the bottom, right, it should error out. It will tell you right away. This tool will tell you that, hey, you can't have this statement here. I'm not sure if it'll tell you that or not, but yeah, it's not valid at this position, expecting EOF. EOF means end of file, or the semicolon, right? So it just means that it's the wrong order. I wish it just say it's the wrong order, but it doesn't give you that information. So the order is indeed important. All right, so that is the select from the where and the order by clauses. Okay. Yeah. And then again, the limit is no limit. So you can put the limit at the bottom here, limit 3, right? Make sure you terminate that down here. If your script has only one select statement, then the semicolon is indeed optional. As you can see, I think it should be okay, right? So you can see there's no problem there because it is the last statement and the only statement here. I mean, it knows that select follows these attributes and it must end at the limit down there, so it knows it. But as soon as you type something down here, another like select, then it has a problem. Okay, so again, just follow the convention or follow this rule, semicolon at the end of your entire statement. So when you set the limit like this, right, it's gonna just show the top 3 from top to bottom. So if I have 112 or 114, it will just show the top 3. Okay, so let's see what else I need to look at. Let's go back to the syntax page. And that is the where clause, right? We got to order by where clause. Just in case if I miss something, I have some examples in here. Again, these examples, they should work with SQL Server as well as MySQL. They look very similar as far as I know. But the where clause followed by condition and or in the not operator here, I use them. You can also use the not, something is not true. And then you have something. This is something else, a little bit more advanced stuff. We probably not going to run this in this class, but you can also check something exists or not. It has a subquery, right? You have another select statement inside here, and this select statement must be true and whatnot. So again, don't worry too much about this one here. So that's the word clause. So we're not going to go, into all these different columns and JSON data and whatnot, and again, something or not. Okay, we're not going to go that deep. There's a little bit more advanced stuff. But the word clause, that's good enough for that part. The next is again, more information here. All this operator here, I think they should hold. One thing I want to look at is these between, like, and the in. Okay, these 3 attributes are extremely important and really useful, especially when you want to compare or search, data between some range of numbers or names or whatnot. So let's take a look at the between, like, and the in here first. Okay, so with vendor equal, not equal, that's pretty easy. Okay, let's pick something. Let's pick another column so we have a name, like the invoices has the it's not really nice. Let's have another, maybe work a different table. I want to have some text. So let's pick on the vendors. Okay, let's pick on the vendors. And the vendors has, so it does have, let's redo this, okay? I'll leave this as is. Okay. You can also highlight all your commands and press the control question mark or control / to comment it out. You select it again and you hit that same key again, it will uncomment for you. As opposed to going to every line and do a comment, right? Takes too long. So just shortcut, select the lines you want to comment and then control question mark and that will be commented out. So let's select from the vendor. Select, I want the vendor ID, vendor name, and vendor city from vendors. Let's do this from vendors, and we're going to do where clause. Let's see what I have first. So select that, highlight it, click run. You only run the command that you select. Make sure it's a complete command though. So you have about 122 rows return, and there's all the information down here. Can I move this to the right side? I wish I can. Maybe I can move it in a different day. Okay, so the where clause followed by using the between. So vendor ID. So like where vendor ID between, and between here you put a between 1 I forgot the syntax. Let's take a look back. 1 and yeah, between 1 and something, right? And between is, as far as I know, it's inclusive. This is equivalent to the less than equal and greater equal sign, right? Between 1 and 5, yeah, right? So it should return only 1 and 5 inclusive, including 1 and 5. So it's nice to have the range. If you don't have that, if you don't use the between, then, right, you have to do this, right? You have like vendor ID is greater or equal to 1, right? And vendor ID, have to type the whole thing again, is less than or equal to 5. That's the equivalent to the between clause. Okay. I mean, both will work. This is fine. I should get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, same as the result set. Okay, so it looks exactly the same. But when you see something like this, then you do the range using the between, shorter. Okay. Now the in is when you use the or. So if I say if vendor ID is equal to kind of the or, right, equal to 1, or like this, if equals 1, or when that equals 5, right, or equals something, then you're going to have, in this case, both 1 or 5 return if they exist. In this case, it should. I have 1 and 5 only because that's what I want, right? You have a lot of ors in there. Now, the shortcut for this is by using the in statement. So let me put a semicolon here. Comment this out. For like where vendor ID in, and then here you put a list of numbers. I think it's in the parentheses, like 1, 5, 7, like that. Okay, so this is the or. It's like the or operator, 1 or 5 or 6 or whatever in the vendor ID column or field. So this is like a function. Right? So you run that, you're going to get all 1, 5, and 6. If you put something here like 999, which doesn't exist, it should still be fine. It's just not returning that 999 because it doesn't have it. Okay. And don't forget that you can even have like in or here, right? So vendor ID is in this field, right? And maybe you have like, what do you have? City, right? Vendor city is in, you put the city here, like Fresno, Chicago, like that. So I have 2 of them. It must be one of these and must be one of these. So if I have it, it's none. So you can have compound conditions followed by and or and so forth. So that's the in operator. The other one is the like operator. The like is it's a very powerful operator. It looks like this. Let me comment this out. Like means it's like a wild card also. Like is it matches exact number, maybe not the vendor ID. Let's go with the vendor city, okay? So city, like means is same as equal to, let's say, I know Fresno, is it Fresno here? I don't know. Yeah, so we have Fresno there. It's my old hometown, by the way. So like Fresno, I mean, it matches exactly the word or the text Fresno. If you happen to like mistype it like that, then there's no matching for that word or text or the number, right? So the like is very commonly used in this context where you match exactly to a text. The like in this case is exactly the same as the equal sign, right? It returns 14 rows. If I do the equal sign, it should also return 41 rows, okay? Because it's matched exactly. Now, what's different about the like is this. I put like again, meaning that I want anything in this city that starts with the letter S. You put a percent after that, okay? So the percent in this case becomes a wildcard. So as long as it starts with the letter F, after that, it matches everything. It returns everything that matches the letter F. In this case, as you can see, it must begin with the letter F, ends with anything. So as you can see, we have 44 instead of 41 because Fresno, and then we have Fairfield is in there. And another one, I think Fort Washington is there as well. So you can see. So you can check, right? F, what about A? Okay. See, it returns that in there. So the like function will operate as that, like that. What if I want to have the starts with anything but ends with an A, right? And so you can do that, and then I have all these cities that ends with A, right? Again, it's case insensitive. Capital A or lowercase a should still be okay if I'm not mistaken. Okay, so that's good, right? What if it's in between? Then you wrap both with a percent like this. Any word in there, whether a single word or the entire text, entire field, I should say, that contains the letter A, returns that. And we're going to have 61 rows that have A's in them. Okay. You can have like AD, right, for medicine. So you go. It should, narrow that down to whatever you have found matching here. Right? AD with a space, right? And I have 0 because there's no words in there have the space after the AD. Okay, so that is that. What if you put like space A, like that, and then when I put like a space in here, right? So you can see you can easily get crazy with this thing here, but just be careful that the dollar and the percent must be in the text here. If I just leave it like this, it's incorrect syntax. Okay, it has to be in the command here, and it can only be used with the like. Okay? If you put an equal sign, then if you do equal sign, I mean this is an actual character, and there is going to be none with that letter A percent in there, right? So that is the difference between the equal sign and the like in here. So very useful, very powerful for making queries and whatnot. Okay, I think we should take a little bit break. Let's take a 10-minute break and we'll come back and we'll continue on with the other attributes. All right, so I'll see you in about 10 minutes. Oh, I think I just... All right, so back to this table, we kind of look at it, the between the like and the in already. There are a few others as well. You can try the all, any, and some, also really interesting. I'm going to go back and look at the other clause, which is the, okay, so again, this is the order, right? So the where clause group by having in order. So let's go and look at the group by clause. Okay, so I have the correct syntax down here. Now, group by is useful when you And I have a scenario here. I don't know if we can find something similar in the AP database, but we'll take a look. So here's an example where the group by clause becomes useful. When you count something, let's say you count the total order quantity for a sales order by ID. And you can see here that in this table, let me make it a little bigger here, right? You have 1, 2, so 2, the order 43660 has 2 quantity order, 64367Ds. There are 4 records, but then the total count for those is about 7, 2, 4, 5, 6, 6. And then the 43672 has that many numbers. So in this case, it's not a big deal because only like 9 records, and you can count them and order them together so you can manually tabulate them. But if you have, let's say, 1,000 records or more, and you want to count how many are in this, order ID of 43660, and you want to add all the order quantity. So instead of having manually look at all of them, you could use the group by clause. And so what group by clause would do is it will group all the order number in their group, like 43660 in their own group. And then it will, in this case, it will also add up all the order quantity together for you to give you a really nice result. So from there, if I navigate to take a look at this in a minute, we'll come back to this result here. So as you can see that we group the order numbers based on the sales order ID, and it will, categorize those into their own ID, unique IDs, and then it will add up all the quantities for you, so you don't have to manually count them. Okay, so this is extremely useful in this scenario. Where maybe you can try the one with the city stuff, like all the city in Chicago or in Fresno, they have a certain number of something. We can categorize by city and the number of certain things based on that city, so you don't have to count them by yourself. Okay. Now this is group by is usually used in conjunction with one of these we call aggregators. Okay, so a function is built into the system. So again, not all database systems have the same functions, but some of these are pretty ANSI standards, like the sum and the average and whatnot. They are applicable to all relational database systems. Some are only to a certain type. But let's go back and look at a list of functions, what we call these aggregate functions, that are built into a MySQL server. Okay. They are usually deal with math, like numbers only. So not true in every case, of course, but you can see that the count is also another very important function you can use. Instead of, select star from a table, it will give you the entire column, the result, and then you look at the very last statement, it will tell you the number of rows. Instead of, displaying all the data, I just want how many numbers or rows in that table. Then you use the count function to do that. So the syntax is on the right side. That means that you must pass something, or in this case, a column name to the function. So it would know what to do with that, right? So in the count, for example, I want to count a column in the table that has, usually a column has data to be more accurate. Because if you have a column that is empty or has no values, I believe it's not going to count that. So you might have the wrong result. So when you do a count, you just want to get any of the no values. Okay, that is really important. So usually when you count, you always count the primary key columns, right? It's always guaranteed to have numbers, have data. If you count something like, like a phone number 2 or email address, maybe not all people have those in the data, so that may be null, and you get incorrect value. Okay, so that is the count. The sum is simply, in this case, is only for values, numbers only. The sum, average, and the I will give you numbers only. The minimum, the max, I think this can give you, we'll try. I'm not sure if it does give you text or not. I don't think it does, but it has to do with numbers only. The rest are more like standard deviation, more of the statistic stuff. But the first 5 functions are quite common and quite useful in our case. Okay, it's similar. I was saying for the SQL Server, as you can see here, right? They have some little different VARP, and there's no VARP here. As you can see, some are not standard across all servers. So let's take a look at one more rule I want to show you is maybe over here. Okay. Let's go to the next tab. Okay, so I put in yellow here. When you add an aggregator in your statement like this, okay, when you add that and you are using a group by clause, if you want to group them, then you must include all the columns in your select statement if you have them. Otherwise, you can't use the group by. Okay, that is one of the rules. It's not as strict in MySQL as in SQL Server, but the rule still holds. So I'll show you what that means. Okay, so let's go over here again in our example. And the vendor, so we have, like, if I run this again, we have, all the names with the A. So we have this about like 61 of them. Okay, so let's go back to the Fresno one. Okay, so that's going to return all the data in the Fresno. I'm not sure what. Yeah, only Fresno. So let's do this. Let's get all the vendor city. Let me copy this and start a new statement up here. Select vendor ID from vendors, and then if I missed this one. Okay, so run this again. I get out these from Fresno. Let's turn that off. So, right, we have a lot of cities here, about 122 rows. And if you want to count, like, I'm not sure what we can do here. ID, let's do zip code. Let's do this. Yeah, this is not useful data here. Let's go back to the invoices, maybe. Yeah, invoice has some totals. That's something maybe a little better. Let's do a select. I want the so you do the count, right? Count from invoices. Okay. Again, the rule, you have to put something here. If you're not sure, I think you can put star here, which is okay, but it's kind of redundant using that in the star. Star means everything, so 114, right? I don't know if there's any null values in here, maybe. But ideally, you want to pick a column that is guaranteed to have data. So in this case, it's like the invoice ID, right? It's going to have an invoice ID in here. So invoice ID. And that guarantees to have an ID for sure. And if it's correct, it should give us 114 as well, as you can see. Okay, so that is the usefulness for this count function, as opposed to the star give you entire data. You don't want that, because you can, if you have like 1 million records, imagine printing all of them out just to know to count the number of rows. That's very CPU intensive. You don't want to do that. So count the ID again. If you do this function, if you use a function here, the column name becomes whatever the column is. So depending on the system, here we have a column name with the function in that ID name. In SQL Server, you probably get just a blank column. There's no name. And in this case, this is where you have the alias, right, become useful. You can put here invoice ID. Maybe you can put like total invoice ID count. And it will replace that, ugly column with that something more semantical. So you have a column ID here. It tells you there are many columns in this invoices table. I should say this is not correct. Invoice, total invoices maybe. Right? Something like that will be more meaningful. Okay. So that is the count. If I want to also include other data, let's say that we're going to do the average or the sum of not the ID, but the sum of the total payment total, right? So payment total. Okay, that's the sum payment total. And we can put here total. And then we got that many number, right? That is the sum of all the numbers. So you don't manually add them yourself. And then you can have like other columns too. So you can add the sum, and then maybe I'll do this. The next one, I want to get the invoice ID as well and see what that looks like. Okay, so you can see what the error is already at the bottom. I just gave you the rule a few seconds ago that you cannot run, okay, you cannot have other columns if you have an aggregator somewhere in your select statements. If you include another column in here, it's forcing you to use a group by clause right down here, okay? So that means you must group it. So down here I have to say group by, and then the name of that column that is not part of the aggregator function. So in this case, it's the invoice ID. I must include that in here in the group by clause in order for this to work. Okay, so in this case, now you can see it's going to give you all the invoice numbers. And then it's going to sum the payment total column for that invoice number. Now, in this case, it's different, right? Because initially it was count and then just sum everything in the total payment total, give me the result. But now I'm saying for each invoice ID, if there is a duplicate, in this case, no duplicates, you're going to get 114 rows, not really useful. I want to total the sum of the total in that particular invoice. What if I have like the invoice number instead? Invoice ID, invoice number. So let's do that and replace this in here. Okay, so now I still get 114. Do I have any duplicates in here? I don't know. I can't tell. Let's see. Okay. Yeah, I can't tell. Let me sort. Okay, let's sort by. So we can see order by invoice number. Okay, so run that. Okay, so you see that we do have duplicates, right? We have these, or do we? I don't know. I can't tell. No, no duplicates. Yeah, I don't see any duplicates here. If there are duplicates, then you should see the same invoice number. Yeah, so this is not really useful. Maybe the terms, let's try another one. The terms ID. Terms ID. Group by. Okay, so you can see that it's already, sum up all the total for the terms ID based on that ID in that group, right? If I don't include that ID here, and if I just add the total for each of those, then it's going to have like 1, 1, 1, 1, and then has different total amount. And then you have to manually add them up to get this total. But because I'm using the group by clause, so if I do this, if I just select that, right? Oh, the error. So if I just do this, if I don't do the sum, so you can see the raw data. You can see, right, the raw data. 3 has all the terms with 3 has these values. So it has these here, there's some more down here, many more. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So what the sum does is that we're going to sum all these numbers in the group with the term ID, collect all of them, add them up, right? So we're going to add them up for each of the ID for the 1s and 2s and 3s and 4s and 5s, collect them all, add the sum together, assign that to that ID. Okay, and then we're going to group them based on ID, we sort it as well. So that's why instead of having 114 rows, we're going to get only 5 rows, but we had the total sum added to those columns. And that is where the group by clause becomes extremely useful and powerful in this nature. Okay. This is just one example, but it's used in this case. Now, the other, again, however many columns you put here, you must include in the group by clause. So if I add another one, let's say the payment date, right? So I have 2 columns are not part of the aggregator function. And so therefore, I must include them. As you can see, it fails down here. Must include all the terms, all the columns that are not used inside the aggregator in the term group by clause. It's the rule. Okay? So just remember that. Now the having clause. Let's look at the having clause for a minute. The having clause, if I remember, where is it at? Oh, not that one. Okay, so that is aggregator rule 1. Let's go with number 2. Okay, it also, the having clause is used with the group by clause. The having clause is similar to the order by clause. So having clause is a condition that you can test against the group by clause. So whatever it is, you can, so the group by will have a data set, right? And then based on that group by data set, you can apply the having clause. So the having clause is, I think I mentioned I say order by, it's not correct. Having clause is similar to the where clause, okay? It's a conditional clause. So for example, in this example, we get everything from the sales order, the minimum order quantity, the maximum quantity from the sales order detail. We must include this column because this is the only column that is not inside the aggregate function. So we include that with group by. And then based on this condition where clause, we get these data here. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 records. And then now we can filter this, right? So this is the result of the group by clause. After this group by clause, if you stop here, that's what you're going to get. But if you want to filter this again, since you only have one where clause to filter the first set, and then now I want to filter this again, so you can't use another whereby clause. You have to use a having clause to, set another condition based on this data set. So in this case, I want to return only the records or rows based on this group by clause that has a maximum order quantity greater than 2, right? So in this case, then look at this, and only what I'll get is basically the row 4 and 5, right? Rows 4 and 5 have numbers greater than 2, and that's what you get down here. Okay, so the having clause is used after the group by clause if you want to set a condition based on this data set. Okay, so where clause is from the select from the table, and then you group that based on whatever that is, and then if you want to set a condition, use the having clause. And you can do the order by at the bottom down here. Okay, so that is the difference between the where clause and the having. So order by is going to be the bottom, so we'll leave that as down there. So in this case, if I go back to just go back to the term ID, so it's a bit shorter. So we run and we have 5 records, right? Where the total is that and then terms ID in there. If I want to filter based on the terms ID, then you will have it here. Having and then terms ID, equal to 2, right? In that case, it's just going to return that single record, the total only for 2. Okay, so this is the same as the where clause. I did not do that here, but we could have another where clause up here. So if it's 2, then that is that. And let me run this again. So I get, so if I want to maybe get based on the total number of cells. Now notice that this is there's no column name for the total. So you can try like maybe having total. Let's see if you let me do this alias name, total, okay, greater than maybe 9,000. Okay. And then we're going to order by the term ID as usual. Okay, so this is not correct because this is not the actual column name. I can't use it here. So this doesn't work, right? So in order to get sort based on that aggregator, you have to basically call this again. Okay, call that replace it here. So based on those totals sums for each of these records, only returns the one that have a number that is larger than 9,000. I should get about 3 of them, right? Or just basically 2. Okay, so that is how you use the group by and the having clause. So in this case, the group by will return a data set, second in RAM, virtual table, and then the having clause would then filter that the second time based on the where clause, and you return that down here. You sort it, and then that's the result. Okay. So, the condition over here, you can have just like the where clause, you have compound conditions where sum is this, and then end, or, right, and terms ID, for example, terms ID equal to, or, greater than 2. In this case, I only have 1, which is going to be row terms of 3, and I can basically narrow that down to only a single record. So you get the idea, right? Now it's different than doing up here. If I were like invoices where terms ID is greater than 2, if I do that, it's different, right? Because I already narrowed down to only those records. And if I do that here, then this is kind of redundant because, I'm going to get it. I'm not going to have anything greater than less than 2 already. I already exclude the 2s and 1s, but then you may not get what you want. So it's different. So just mindful that this where clause may not be the same as this having clause. Okay, because this is a different data set you receive from the initial clause. All right, so those are the commands that you will use. I did not go through all the functions, but you can certainly choose the maximum, minimum based on the columns, how many you have in there, and then group them and then print them out and so forth. Let's see, what else do I need? You guys have any questions? I'm sorry I didn't ask you, but if you have questions, just let me know. Okay. So again, these are based on a SQL Server. I think the syntax would still hold because they are ANSI standards. The only things that may not work are some of the functions. Okay, if I list the functions that are in the SQL Server, that only applies to SQL Server, and then, but the where clause group by having those are pretty standard across all relational database systems. Okay, so that is the having clause. I think that is all I want to cover for this. So we have the where clause, group by order, having clause, and the aggregate functions to count into find minimum, maximum. Okay. One more thing I want to show you before we call it tonight is you can also combine columns. Okay. So, for example, if I just close this. So let's say that, let me do this. It goes here. Let's go with the vendor names. Are there any like people's name here? Vendors. Not vendors. What is this? No. General ledger. Oh, I don't have anything has. Let's go to the example down here and see. Okay, customers, maybe this one here. Okay, so the customers table under EX tables, let's select that EX database under customers. So select something from the customers table. Okay, so if you want to select like, the customer last name, it's a long one, last name and first name. You notice that now my tool actually does the IntelliSense, it gives me the shortcut. Okay, if I do that and I just want, just the top 10. So I get these names down here, right? So I have two columns and they're printed down here.